Hello, I'm Pearl Howie, and welcome to Authentic Success Your Way. I hear all the time from people how much they want to go on retreat, so I thought I would bring you to the wonderful Crouchers Orchards Hotel. It's still early, the sun is still coming up, and they're serving breakfast still. But it's a beautiful place to come and take some time out to relax. This is a series of 7 videos, a journey, even what you might call a retreat, a way, a pilgrimage, a Camino. We're going to go to the beach, we're going to go down to the woods, and we're going to find some places in nature where you can relax, let go, and feel safe to feel your own feelings. I've been one of those people that has had success, or what I might call a notion of success. The time when I had the flat, the car, the job, the friends, the parties. But inside, I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was living what we call a living death, because I wasn't letting myself do any of the things that I loved. I wasn't writing, I wasn't dancing, I wasn't being me. I wasn't making films. So sometimes our authentic success is just about opening up to the things that we have closed off. Sometimes it's about making big changes. Sometimes just very tiny adjustments to where we are. But we often feel that we need something else because we know things are just not quite in alignment. Now, I've studied with Native American shaman, and the ancient shaman all knew the truth that the answers are within you. So these exercises, these workshops are just about reflecting back to you what you know inside. So you don't have to do them all, you don't have to do them in order, but they are practices that I have used for many years to find my own way to my authentic success. And we're also going to talk about fear of success. And one thing I have learned is that every single person will face fear of success in their lives. It's the most normal thing in the world. So I hope you'll use these videos as a retreat if you're not able to come away and go on a retreat with me right now. Perhaps one day you will join me here at Crouchers Orchards or another retreat, or find another one that is perfect for your needs. I hope these videos will help you to find your own way, and that I see you down the road on both our ways. Namaste, and I hope you enjoy. See you at the end of the road. Hello and welcome to Authentic Success Action, the dip. So we can do a lot of talking, we do a lot of thinking, but ultimately what makes the difference is the action, or the inaction, or the non-action. And this video, this workshop, is just all about looking at how you can take a dip along the path to your authentic success. So for everybody, that's going to be different. I'm not suggesting that we all go out and have a dip in the ocean, although if we were doing a retreat and you were down here with me, that's exactly what we were doing. We'd be going out and dipping our toe in the water as a power journey, as an act that actually helps us to see that we are more powerful than we sometimes believe we are. And on the beach, everything's up for grabs. You never know what's going to happen. There's going to be an aeroplane. There's going to be strong winds. You don't know what the current's going to be doing. And that's why I love using this as an analogy for doing a dip, because we have to consider safety. We have to consider what it's like to actually get out there. But most days I do a little dip, because most days I just want to see what the temperature of the water is. And if it's a beautiful day for going for a swim or a paddle, or if it's a day when I'm better off just walking across the top with the grass and everything. So what's so important about doing a dip? Well, it's about having a taster. It's about having a little try, a little feel of what might be your authentic success. So in awareness, we looked at different images. We started to sort of find those breadcrumbs for your path of, like, you know, what is it that I'm not doing? What is it that's calling me? And sometimes it's our authentic success calling, and sometimes it's the path. So something that's along our way on our journey to our authentic success. And I want to make that clear, because sometimes we feel like we failed if we achieve something and it doesn't feel like the final success, you know, where we want to end up. And it's not a failure, it's just a stop. You know, it's just a place along the route. It's important when you're going to do a dip that you think about safety. Safety first, always, okay? It's really easy here. We've got a beautiful hotel. I've got everything I need. I've got a toilet. I've got the bar kitchen and then the restaurant kitchen. I've got water. It's a hot day. I don't have to worry about suntan lotion because I'm inside. Bit of a breeze coming through. You know, so I've kind of thought about my safety here. But when we go to do a dip, we have to think about other kinds of safety. You know, is my bag safe? Is my bag secure? If I'm going down to the beach to do a dip, what's the weather like? Again, sun or cold? What's it going to be? So we have to think about safety first, because when we're doing a dip or anything, anytime we're on our Camino, on our way, we have to think about our personal safety, our physical safety, our mental, emotional safety, our spiritual safety. So it is important, even though we're doing what you could call personal growth, well-being, and spiritual journey, to think about our safety, think about what works for us. What do we need? Because we're all so different. But what's really important about trying to do these workshops as a retreat, as a time for you to be able to have the space that you need to focus on yourself and what's going on for you, is it gives you the safety to get away from anything that might affect you and stop you from being able to do what you want, for being true to yourself. And I'm talking about emotional safety. And for a lot of us, there are times in our lives when we haven't been able to feel our feelings. We haven't been able to express those feelings, but even more, we haven't been able to feel them in the first place. There's so much going on, so much confusion perhaps, or perhaps we were in a situation where we felt that if we expressed a feeling, we weren't being loyal to somebody else, and that would put us in danger. Sometimes when we're young, there's a lot of complicated family dynamics, things like parents divorcing, situations with our brothers and sisters, even situations around people using drugs or alcohol. And in those situations, very often what we do is we survive. And we're going to talk more about survival later. But what we do in those situations is we put our emotions away because it isn't safe to feel. And I really hope with these videos, these workshops, I give you a space where you can start to feel safe, to feel your feelings. Another thing that's going to happen, hopefully for you, I know it happened for me as I went on my Camino, my journey, is I started to understand better what love is and what it isn't. And because of that, I learned that it is safe to love. It's safe to love myself. It is safe to love what I love, what I enjoy. And those things are very important things to learn when we perhaps grew up in a place where it wasn't safe to feel. And if doing a video workshop or coming to a one-day workshop or even reading a book isn't enough for you, think about dipping into the idea of going on a journey, going on a retreat, where you have the space and the environment where you feel safe to talk about your feelings. That's happened for me a lot when I've been at conventions or on retreats or on trainings, that other people have finally opened up and talked about how they truly feel because they were finally able to get that distance from a situation where they couldn't open up to how they really felt. Okay? It's so important to have that safe space where you can just be yourself. And when we learn what love is and what love isn't, then we know that it is truly safe to always love. It doesn't mean to say that we have to do what somebody we love asks of us. It doesn't mean to say that we do things for people just because they love us or they say they love us. But we find the place where we know that no matter how we feel about other people or how they feel about us, we can finally be true to ourselves. I always say having a dip is a lot like trying a taster of an ice cream. And you know, you can have all the ice creams in the world, and you could do all your research and you could see what other people like, what are the favorite flavors of the nation and all that kind of thing, what's the speciality of the house, all that. But until you actually taste it, how are you going to know what's your favorite? How are you going to know what it tastes like for you? And even on a different day, I know that sometimes I like one flavor, I have it on another day, it doesn't taste so good. It's that actually living it. You know, it's in living it that we understand if it's right for us and if it's right for us today. Maybe you had a favorite flavor of ice cream when you were a kid or a teenager, when you were 10, when you were 20, when you were 30, when you were 40, when you were 50, when you're 60, when you're 70. But your flavor of ice cream that you love might change. Maybe they bring out some new flavors. Wouldn't that be great? So you have to keep tasting. You have to keep tasting things in life to know what you really like, to know who you are today. And part of the dip is really, you know, the practice of it is to keep checking in with yourself and to keep learning about who you are. You know, what was right for you 10 years ago might not be right for you now. What was right for you 10 seconds ago might not be right for you now. There's a saying that you can't step into the same river twice because the river's always changing. Of course, the sea is always changing, but you are also always changing. So you cannot step into the same river twice because you are never the same from moment to moment, just like the sea. And that's beautiful, magical, and it's often really, really scary because it's change, you know, and we find change so scary, especially when we have changed so much that we have to change our lives. And sometimes people don't like that. And that's okay, because it's just part of life. And we are allowed to grow. We are allowed to change our minds. We are allowed to change our relationships. We are allowed to change our careers. We are allowed to change our health. We are allowed to do all these things because we are free. We are born to be free. So you're doing a dip. The important thing is to maintain that sense of awareness that we talked about, that we worked about in the first workshop, okay? So as you're doing your dip, whatever it is, think about how it feels, okay? Really stay present with your emotions. If you're tasting ice cream, what does it taste like? What's the differences between them? How does it make you feel afterwards? Do you digest it easily or is it difficult? If you go into the ocean, what does it feel like? What emotions does it bring up? Anything that you're doing, if you start to look at publishing a book, how does that feel to think about your book? How does it feel when you read the how-to? Whatever you're doing, maintain that sense of presence. It's really what we could call mindfulness. Staying present, staying with our emotions, staying with your feelings. And in this dip, the work is really to be yourself. That's all. Just be yourself. Stop thinking about what other people might think about what you're doing. Stop thinking about the photos you're taking, the video. And just stay present with, how does this really feel for me? It's important because it's a practice of staying present, being yourself. And it's also important because we're going to work on those emotions when we look at analysis. We don't have to do the analysis workshop. You don't have to get there. But by staying present with your feelings, you start the work, you do the work. It is the work to just be yourself and enjoy life and know what brings you, yourself, joy. Okay? So it's important to remember that when we do our activities, our exercises, what we're doing is we're building and developing a practice of trying things, of not being afraid of stepping out of our comfort zone and trying something different. We can only do certain things at certain times. For example, if we want to go and pick blackberries, they have to be in season and they have to have ripened. So sometimes we might set ourselves up for failure by trying to do things when it's just not the right time. So give yourself a break, and if you're setting yourself up to take a dip or any action, just think about your timing. When I talk about action, it doesn't necessarily mean specifically action, because sometimes taking a dip with an action is sometimes doing what we would call a non-action or inaction. What I mean by that is sometimes our dip could be saying no to something. It could be stopping something, not doing something. Or an example of something really big, it could perhaps be saying, going on strike. So going on strike is a really big action, a lot of work around it, but it's about saying, no, we're not going to do this. So when we're looking at a dip, sometimes it can be about looking around and saying, hang on, I'm doing too much of this. I need to slow down. This is something I don't want to do. Or what happens if I don't do it? Or doing less. And sometimes we need to do a dip because we need to see how that feels and what the implications are of doing that. So sometimes it's about setting boundaries, saying to people, I don't want this. Sometimes it could be about thinking about doing something like working just our work hours and not doing a lot of overtime, especially unpaid overtime, and seeing how that feels, seeing what reactions are, and figuring out what's right for you. So when we're planning a dip, one thing we need to think about is the point of no return. Now this is something that sailors knew about a long time ago. And if they were going on a long sea voyage, what they knew was there was a point when they were going on their journey where they had to keep going. Because if they turned round, they were too far from shore and they would run out of food, they would run out of water before they reached the shore they left from. So there was a point on the journey where if they were in trouble, it was no good. They still had to keep going and get to the other side. And that's something we need to be aware of, whatever kind of action we're taking, because sometimes when we go too far, we've gone too far. So I'm going to try and take you on a dip with me right now. I'm literally going to do it. So most of the time you take your shoes off if you're going for a dip. Sometimes you keep them on because sometimes there can be sharp things in the water. So I'm going to keep mine on today. And literally all we're going to do, we're going to go out and get our toes wet and see how it feels. Actually, it's not as cold as I thought it was going to be. That's all right. Okay. Sometimes I have to run out and go sit and dry off. Oh, actually, no, it's got cold. Okay. All right. We might just come out for a little bit. And that's all we need to do is just a tiny dip, just a taste. It's just a taste of it and see, come out, think about it again. Oh, and just see how, we could say the lay of the land, but it's also like the temperature of the sea. Just get a feeling for the environment. And if it's something that feels right for us. Actually, it did feel quite right. I think I'm going to go in for a little bit more. Okay. Ooh, okay. That is a little bit chilly. Okay. But, hello. The dog is actually not going in, which is a bit of a, shows you just it might be a little bit cold out here today. So when we're talking about taking action, whether it's a dip or later in this series of workshops, a dunk, it's useful to, as well as being aware, staying aware of our feelings about what we're doing, thinking about and trying to sort of figure out why we might find things really difficult. So a dip is fantastic because what we're saying to ourselves, our self-talk, whatever we're saying to ourselves or even other people, is very much, I'm just going to have a taster. I'm just going to see what it's like. So it could be something like, and this might feel bigger than a dip. If you were thinking about going to study at a college or university and you went to an open day. So it just allows us to have like a taster and see how things feel. But usually it's when we do those things that the real challenges come up for us. So whether that's our friends and family saying, well, that's ridiculous, you're too old, or, all kinds of things. Or it's ourselves, it's our own interior monologue, the chatterbox, what we could call the ego. And we're going to talk more about that later. And all of these things will start to come up. And I'm going to talk in a later workshop about when we think, I can't cope, and how that is sometimes for us when we are doing too much, going through burnout, or just trying to be somebody that we're not. It can get quite complicated. But sometimes that little voice that says, I can't cope, or no, I can't do this, or oh, it's too much. Sometimes that's just our ego talking. And what's great about doing like a dip is our response is, I'm just going to have a taster. But also it allows us to kind of see what's going to happen when we start to take action about something. And I don't know about you, if you're like the great majority of people, unlike me, those things are going to come up when you're going to try and take an action to do something that is something really true to who you are. It's really authentic success. And that sounds crazy, but sometimes that's one of the ways that we know it's something that is authentic success for us, when we have so much resistance to it. And when it's part of our authentic success that we haven't been able to do yet. And two things I always talk about, it's on my website as well. And when we're little, we get taught how to behave. So many different things we get taught how to do, not to do, often because we're girls. And two of the things that always came up for me when I was a kid are don't wander off and don't talk to strangers. And if you think about it, those are incredibly sensible things to teach your kids, right? I think that's probably what most people would call good parenting. Teach your children not to wander off and not to talk to strangers. But of course, as we go on, we have to talk to strangers. We have to start communicating with people, whether it's going to school, whether it's going to a playgroup, whether it's in a shop. A doctor, a nurse, we have to start communicating with people that we don't know. And in terms of wandering off, if we don't wander off or go off by ourselves, that means we have to be with like a parent our whole lives, or a family member. And that's very restrictive. And what I discovered about myself was those two big things. As I got older and I started to travel and I started to run my own business and like stand out and give out leaflets, I found I really loved that. And when I went off traveling around the world, there was a part of me that really, really needed to do that. And a part of me that had kind of been shut down. And that's what happens for a lot of us, is that when we confront those big rules, those big rules that we have in our heads, in our lives, we suddenly see how they're holding us back. And that's when we start to kind of break down those walls. And we could call them limiting beliefs, we could call them barriers, we could call them blocks. There's probably a lot of whole psychological words for them, but I think you know what I mean. And we can start to break down anything that's stopping us from finding our own way, our own true, authentic path. And that's why I think the dip is so important, and I use it all the time. I used it this afternoon. I rang up and made an appointment to speak to somebody about something, and it might not be something, but it's something that I'm questioning. And so it's important for me to take those few first steps and dip my toe in. And at the moment, the more I do, the more I think, hey, this could be relevant to me, this could be part of where I'm going next. Or it might not. But that's okay, because I'm not making commitments. I'm not making huge decisions. What I'm doing is I'm just taking those very first early steps to say, is this something I really want to discover? No, that's all. That's all. I'm not having to go all in. Those actions are so powerful. And I think that's the thing about the dip to remember is, even though it's tiny, it can be incredibly, incredibly powerful. And it can also help us to start seeing what are the big limiting beliefs, what are the big stories in our lives that we keep coming back to. I am this, I am that. And we're going to talk more about that later. But one of the things we sometimes need to escape in order to move forward is to let go of the person that we think we are, and let go of the story of who we are that we've been telling ourselves, and perhaps our friends and family have been telling us we are our whole lives. And sometimes we need to just let go of all of that. So sometimes a dip could be doing something that people say to you, oh, that's not like you, or that's very out of character, or oh, I didn't know you like that. And sometimes that can be just the most wonderful thing when we kind of surprise other people and we surprise ourselves. And I think no matter how old you get, you can still surprise yourself. One of the most important dips that we can take is to dip into allowing joy into our lives, allowing ourselves to feel joy, because it's really at the crux of a lot of our fear of success, our fear of doing what we love, of allowing ourselves to feel joy without that fear of losing it, without that fear of any other emotions that will come up when we allow that joy into our lives. Just letting go and letting ourselves be free to be joyful and peaceful. And a lot of us shy away from it because of fear of loss of success, because we're not used to it. It's actually a very brave thing to do, because when we lean into that joy, it brings up all our emotions. So sometimes we need to do it in really small amounts, really tiny, tiny dips, feeling that joy, because it can feel so hard to allow it into our hearts and our lives. And like everything else, if we want to do something, we have to practice it. If we want to master it, we just have to keep practicing it. And one of the beautiful things that happens when we take a dip is that we discover the truth. Very often we've made assumptions about whatever we want to do, or we've heard stories, we've been told things about, how it was for other people. But when we set out to do things for ourselves and give it a go, we never know exactly how it's going to be. And that's how we discover the truth. And when it comes to dealing with fear of success, as we go into our authentic success, what we often discover is those consequences of success that we thought might be true just really aren't. So we might stop ourselves from doing things by thinking about all the things that might come out of it, all the things that might go wrong, all the things that we might need. And yet when we actually get out there, we realize actually it's probably quite rare that those things are going to be a problem for us. Sometimes it's very, very hard to figure out the truth, because we live in a world of illusion. Many, many things that we think are true are really just things we've made up. So one of the things I found really, really helpful when I'm trying to figure out what is true, especially if I'm feeling afraid of something, is to figure out what is real and what is an illusion. And for this, I always use the reflection of a tree in the water. And there's so many times when I've been completely freaking out on my path, on my journey. And I've gone outside, usually at 4 a.m, and I've often found a swimming pool or a body of water and a tree beside it. And that's what brings me back. It kind of grounds me. I can touch the tree, I can feel the tree, and I know the tree is real. But I can look down at the reflection of the tree in the water, and I know that that's just a reflection. It's just an illusion. I can't touch it. If I tried to, I'd fall into the water. And it's that kind of thinking that can be so useful when so much of life is an illusion. So much of life is made up. And sometimes something can be real and an illusion. For example, your favourite movie, perhaps. We know it's a story. We know it's not true. But it's also really a movie. And this kind of thinking can be very confusing. It can be hard to get our heads around. But that's why we take our time. We don't have to rush. We can just sit quietly or stand quietly by the side of the river, side of the swimming pool, and contemplate, meditate, breathe, practice mindfulness to really figure out what is true for us and what is just an illusion, a reflection, or something that we can let go of. And it's like so many things, we can be so close to stuff, be right in front of us, and yet we kind of stay scared, or we make up lots of reasons why we can't do things, like it's too cold, and actually it turns out it's quite warm, or my feet are going to get covered in sand, which they will, and I'll have to wash my feet when I get home, which you will. All of those things. But that's the practice of taking a dip. It's getting over all those thoughts and those sort of ego thoughts of saying, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. And when we come down and we give it a go, guess what? We did it already. Maybe I didn't go for a swim. Maybe I didn't go all the way in. But that's okay, because I've taken that first step. And as we know, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And it's getting out there and taking that first step, getting that taster that is often like the scariest thing. And it can take us so much energy just to get to that first step. And there's so many things that I've done when I've actually got there and done it. I've done the tiniest amount, because it's taken so much for me to actually get there. And it's taken me so much for me to walk in the door. It's like when I went to the London Book Fair for the very first time, just getting there was so hard. I think I spent like an hour there. The next year I spent 4 days because I'd already taken that big step to take that first dip. So the next time it was so much easier. It was so much easier to get out there and do it. And that's what the dip's about. It's the practice of taking dips, taking action, even if it's like a taster, even if it's the smallest amount, because that's often the hardest part of the journey. When I used to teach Zumba, I always used to say to people, there's only one step you have to get right in class, and that is the step into the classroom. And this is like taking the step into this wonderful big classroom of life. And we get to feel how it actually feels. So often we're sitting there imagining it. We're imagining how it would feel. We're looking at vision boards and coming up with all these slogans and doing all this. It's like, but it's about the feeling. It's about being here. It's about doing it. Mindfulness is wonderful, but the mindfulness is about being where you are. So it's about being present. So taking that dip, I can finally be present here. Up until then, I'm not here. I'm not present. I'm not taking the action. So when I get here, it's just the most wonderful feeling of doing it, of being it, of having it. The doing, having, being that is authentic success. I love it. Don't you? I wish you were here. Send you a postcard saying, I wish you were here. But this for me, I love it. I love the beach. If we were on a retreat and you came down here, you might not like it so much. And that's okay, because this is part of my authentic success. But how will you know until you try it? How will you know? You might have a strong feeling and say, no, I don't want to do it in the first place. That's great. Nobody's asking you to do something that you don't want to do. But sometimes just by taking an action, we get that strength to try new things. They're beautiful.